Fact: some of the best things on the planet are created combining two existing entities together. Picture and sound, peanut butter and chocolate, rock and roll? Truly, the greatest parts of life come from mashing two items to form a new one. And that's exactly what the good folks from Quintet did in 1990, combining the world of platforming with the simulation of urban planning as God. From this, we get ActRaiser on the Super Nintendo. In ActRaiser, players take the small role of God, taking it upon yourself to rid the land of monsters and save humanity from the advice of a servant in the form of a little Cupid. Turns out the people of the land don't believe in you as much as they used to, since you last lost your battle with Satan and his 6 lieutenants. Taking matters into your own hands, ActRaiser has you running across the land to defeat monsters and raise society back to its full glory. The two different types of gameplay within ActRaiser are vastly different. The platforming is a bit of a mixed bag and may seem overwhelming at first. The control is a little odd, namely in the jumping. Similar to games like Ghosts and Goblins, once you jump, you're committed to your trajectory and have little to no control in the air. When you're used to most platformers, say like Mario, where you're able to change your direction to tighten jumps, it takes some getting used to. On top of that, the window for your invincibility frames when you take damage is immensely small. If you're not careful, enemies and bosses can sap your health in no time flat. That's only the platforming stages, however. The God gameplay is my personal favorite of the two. Each area of the land starts with 2 humans and a bunch of monster hideouts that constantly spawn demons who attack the civilization. Your job is to help the humans destroy each of the monster locations and continue to rebuild their society along the way. Instead of a simple cursor, you more or less have control of your servant character. They're armed with a bow and arrow, which is used to defeat the attacking demons, who will desolate the new villages if you're not quick enough to stop them. There's 6 different areas throughout ActRaiser, each with a different terrain and a set of problems for you to deal with your god powers. For instance, in cold areas, you'll need to use the sun to warm up and melt ice that stops humans from building new villages in the area. Figuring out which powers to use leads to a bit of thinking, experimenting, and puzzle solving, which is why I found myself loving this mode. Humans will also come to you to ask favors and point you towards the next goal to help bring peace to the land. The bigger your society, the more power you gain for the side-scrolling sections. That makes the God mode even more important, as it's essentially meant to rebuild the world and your stats. Humans will explore the areas of each location when instructed to do so, which means they can bring you special power-ups and even new spells for the side-scrolling sections. In all honesty, after the first level and the subsequent first section of the God mode, I found myself warming up to ActRaiser's platforming a lot more. Every single area is vastly different than the last. Despite each part of the continent having 2 acts, they'll have a common theme, but feel quite different from one another. The use of color and the sprite work is superb. There's a few recurring enemies, but almost every area of the continent wisely has their own demons and monsters for you to slice your way through. And coupled with that is a constant sense of uneasiness with ActRaiser. Each stage is sinister, as though you can tell this land was really ravaged by Satan himself, yet not necessarily torn asunder. Plus, the way that your spirit descends and ascends from the warrior statue just looks cool as hell. But man, if the graphics weren't enough to get you amped to chop some Satan spawns heads off, the music absolutely well. Every track is heavy, invoking that drive to slay anything in your path. But then there's some that really play into that adventure sense, especially for the pyramid level. The sound here is ominous, as if the game knows how tricky the traps here are, and this song is just telling you to proceed with caution. Needless to say, the entire soundtrack fits every level in the game like a glove, and shows off just how strong the SNES's sound chip is when used to its full potential. Really? There's not too much to complain with ActRaiser. It's all around solid, minus the stiff jumping, and even that's pretty easy to get used to. If anything, the difficulty might be the sole factor that could hurt the experience. I say could because ActRaiser is a game that suffers from a downward slope in terms of how hard it gets, or rather doesn't. Since you continually get more health, new magic spells, and the ability to cast more spells, the game's difficulty skews in the player's favor. In particular, once you unlock the Shooting Star spell, every boss is made into a cheese factory. Just cast it a few times and boom, they're done before they can even throw out an attack. Mind you, this didn't hamper my personal enjoyment of the game, but for those looking for a game that will really test your mettle, you may be disappointed that most of the bosses are rendered obsolete fairly early on. ActRaiser is one of the best forgotten titles the Super Nintendo has to offer. It's a shame the series never really took off. I personally love more of the God Mode action. Even if there are titles that do it slightly better, they just don't do it the same. You can maybe blame the lack of success for the series as a whole on ActRaiser's sequel, which changed things up and dropped the simulation mode for strictly action platforming stages. As it stands, ActRaiser remains a killer gem for the SNES, and one that, if you can, definitely should be sought out. Maybe consider saying a prayer tonight that Square Enix remembers that they have this game and can sneak it onto the Switch sooner than later.